hour right now. But we're we are we've been talking about what's happened since the election. We didn't believe Donald Trump could win. Certainly not after January 6th. And we're fighters. We're retired. You know, Karen isn't, but I'm semi-retired. But when it comes to life, you get to retire when you die. Life's a privilege, and you got to fight till the end. We became familiar with the book during the election cycle when Donald Trump said he didn't know anything about it, which we knew was flat untrue. So Karen told me we better get the book and read it. Um, we believe the book's an essential part of Trump's agenda, that it's being implemented at an unprecedented rate. But we also believe that when you look at it, it's in totality, if it's properly explained, many people, including many people who voted for Donald Trump, would not want what this book recommends to be put into effect. Karen and I have a 40-year history with the Heritage Foundation. In 1985 in Fairbanks, Alaska, after a 2-year process, our school district, which I was the superintendent, adopted a textbook called Holt Impressions, and we selected the Canadian edition. And the reason that we did that was because a significant part of the population of our school district were Eskimos and Alaska Natives. And we thought the stories in the Canadian edition most closely aligned. We consulted the Fairbanks Native Association, the Alaska Library Association, the Alaska Federation of Natives, and every single one of our elementary teachers. There's 1,000 teachers in the Fairbanks North Starborough School District, had input and were very enthusiastic about this text. The Heritage Foundation and a group called Focus on the Family out of California got wind of this book and decided that it was witchcraft, that it taught devil worship, and that the native stories were pagan. They sent people to Fairbanks that I would describe as modern-day domestic terrorists. They got 2 of the church. Is something? If people have their mics on, would they mute them, please? After a long process, including an all-night meeting, our school board chose to adopt the textbook without respect to what the Heritage Foundation had to say about it. During the process, though, you should know that we received calls in the middle of the night telling us what color snowsuits our elementary age children had on the playground, and other teachers were similarly terrorized. We had to obtain security. But we did adopt the textbook. But here's what happened. What happened was when I went to the classrooms to talk to the teachers about it, they were afraid to use it. They had been intimidated and were afraid to use it. The parents were upset and concerned. And I then was asked by the governor to go to Juneau. I ran the State Department of Education there. And when I came back to Fairbanks and I asked the superintendent to replace me what happened to the books, he told me he had sold them on the used market, and many of them had never been taken out of the boxes in which they were shipped. These people will go through glass to get what they want, and they will stop at nothing. And so when we heard that Mandate for Leadership was going to be the guide for Donald Trump's agenda, even though he was denying it, we decided that we needed to get it. So here's what we did. This is the book. It's out of print now, and that's why you have to use a PDF to read it. We started on January 20th monitoring the Federal Register, whitehouse.gov, and any other source we could get of what was happening in any of the agencies. And we would take the language that was in the Federal Register or in Donald Trump's executive orders, and we would see if we could tie them to this book. You can see that in the book, there's a number of tabs, and the tabs are all numbered, and everywhere that the number of the tab is tied to a spreadsheet that we made. You can't read it, but what that spreadsheet does is tie that tab to the Federal Register, the whitehouse.gov site to do the comparison to see whether, our first objective was, is this the book? Is this really the plan? And it became so obvious that it was, we had to stop putting tabs in, because just for example, listing on eliminating the DEI, which to us is civil rights and social justice. Just the elimination of that would take over 100 tabs in this book, because this book is advocating for it in every chapter. So we finally figured out we'd have a tab on every page and we wouldn't be able to turn the pages. So we stopped putting the tabs in. The conclusion, I think, is obvious. No reasonable person could ever argue that this isn't an essential part of Donald Trump's agenda. And the other thing that is that the rate at which it is being implemented is shocking, but it's also extremely impressive. And that's why I make the argument that I think we need to respect this book. This book has a plan, and I don't know if there's any time in our history where any administration that has come in with such a well-organized agenda. This book has been in the Heritage Foundation has been in the works for 60 years. They were very instrumental when Ronald Reagan was president. They began working, the book was published in 23, but they began working on it shortly after January 6th. There isn't any question that it isn't the agenda, and therefore needs to be looked at. And as despicable as it is, I think the part of it of needing to be respected is critically important. I use the Ohio State football team. A player on the Ohio State football team was asked whether or not he hated Michigan. And he was told, he said, that's not a strong enough word. We despise Michigan. We can't even say the name. That doesn't mean he didn't watch hundreds of hours of Michigan games. That doesn't mean his coaches didn't analyze everything that Michigan did. So you can fear something, and you can also respect it. And that's what I think we need to do as we're working with this book. The rate at what is being implemented is just plain shocking. And some days, Karen and I get despondent, and we wonder whether or not we're too late. But here's where we are with it, and that is that Karen and I like to debate, and I call it argument, she calls it a discussion. but at any rate, we're running out of gas because we've reached the same conclusions that we're no longer in a position where we can challenge one another. So we just, are kind of quiet. We need other people to help us if we're making any sense at all. If we make any sense to you at all, we need other people to help us to frame the argument, because we believe strongly. We're both from working class neighborhoods in Detroit, union people. And we know that a whole lot of people that we grew up with, some of whom we still know, voted for Donald Trump, lots of them. But we also know that they are reasonable people, and that we have had a hard time coming to respect people who voted for Donald Trump. But somehow, I think for some of them anyway, we're going to have to, because we're absolutely convinced, without a doubt, that there is an argument. And there are things that can be said. There are ways that this book could be explained and the impact of this book could be explained that would make those people realize that is not what they want for their life and what they want for their life. The reason we appreciate the opportunity for what you're affording us here is because, quite frankly, some days we wonder if it's only the indivisibles that are doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like other people are sitting on their hands. Actually, they're in shell shock and they just flat don't know what to do. Well, we don't know what to do either, but we know that we need to keep working on it every single day and that we need to broaden our thinking so that we can come together, show some respect for our fellow citizens, and come up with arguments that would help make people realize that this is not what we want in this country. I mean, I don't want to be over dramatic with it, but not only will it dramatically change our culture, but it will change our ability to speak freely without fear, and uh, and and it fundamentally change the way our government has operated and we expect it to operate. So we don't really know what the next steps ought to be in order to try to frame an argument that can convince people that we're on the wrong track and that we need to get on a good track, and we're stuck with that. And that's why we so deeply appreciate the fact that, you know, you're willing to spend an hour with us tonight. So with that, that's, unless Karen wants to add something.
Not really, not at the moment.
But that's our pitch. And
You know what?